Good morning, everyone. We are going to start our revision module, the chapter 17, breathing and respiration. So we'll start the types of or the steps in breathing. Respiration, that is broadly when we are dividing, the respiration is of two types, that is external respiration and internal respiration. External respiration means it is a physical process. There, the gases are exchanged by diffusion. There is no chemical event, just physical exchange of respiratory gases. The main organ involved in lungs. The second step is internal respiration. Internal respiration means it is a chemical process mediated with the help of enzymes, and there the exchange of gases takes place, that is between blood and the tissues, and there this oxygen is utilized for breaking down of glucose into carbon dioxide, water and energy. So here the substance is converted from one form to another, and that hence that process is called as chemical process. So here the physical process collectively we'll call it as breathing, and the second one, the chemical process, that we will call it as cellular respiration. And here the oxidation of glucose is taking place. The equation is C6H12O6. In the presence of oxygen, convert into carbon dioxide, water and energy. Energy is stored as ATP. Then we will move on to the types of respiration, that is aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. From the term itself, aerobic respiration means in the presence of molecular oxygen, and as a result the carbon dioxide, water and energy will be produced. So majority of plants and animals follows this aerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration means it is in the absence of molecular oxygen, and here the end products are either alcohol or ethyl alcohol or lactic acid. And since it is taking place in the absence of oxygen, the process collectively we can call it as fermentation. So two types of fermentation, alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Mainly it is taking place in yeast cells in the absence of oxygen, and in case the deficiency of oxygen in our body, that is especially in muscle cells, then there can be production of lactic acid. So lactic acid fermentation takes place in muscle cells and alcoholic fermentation takes place in yeast cells. And here the amount of energy will be very less. So this is the equation. In yeast, C6H12O6, that is glucose, will be converted into ethyl alcohol, 2C2H5OH. That means the whole carbon will not be converted into ethanol. It is just out of 6 carbon, 4 carbon only utilized, and the remaining carbon will be produced in the form of carbon dioxide and negligible amount of energy. Even though that less amount of energy only is produced, since yeast is unicellular, it can manage with that negligible amount of energy. In bacteria as well as in worms and the mussels also, the deficiency of oxygen, because ascaris and tapeworm, it is parasitic only. They are living inside the body, they require less amount of energy because they are utilizing already the digested food. So they can survive with that. That is, the equation is C6H12O6, that will be converted into 3 carbon compound, that is lactic acid. 6 carbon compound will be broken down into 3 carbon compound, that is CH3CHOH, COOH, 2 molecules of lactic acid. So that type of respiration is called as lactic acid fermentation. In muscles, that whenever we are doing the strenuous exercise, this lactic acid can accumulate, that can lead to spasm or fatigue, we can say. So this is the different pathways, the diagrammatic representation of pathways of glucose breakdown. So here the glucose will be converted into pyruvate. So this process is called as glycolysis, that is taking place within the cytoplasm. In the absence of oxygen itself, 6 carbon compound will be converted into 3 carbon compound, and there are three fate, that is in the absence of oxygen, that is yeast, alcoholic fermentation can take place. Then products are ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Ethanol is 2 carbon compound, and in the absence or deficiency of oxygen in our muscles, ascaris, etc., the lactic acid fermentation is taking place. The end product is lactic acid and energy, which is 3 carbon compound. Then the pyruvate, again it can convert into within the mitochondria, that is normal respiration, we will say cellular respiration, that is taking place. The organelle which is concerned is mitochondria, which is also called as powerhouse of the cell. Here in the presence of oxygen, the whole glucose will be completely converted, or pyruvic acid will be completely converted into carbon dioxide, water and energy. When you are saying energy, it is approximately 36 or 38 molecules of ATP will be produced from one molecule of glucose. Now we will move on to the next one, the types of respiration. Based on the organ concerned, there are 6 different types of, broadly 6 different types of respiration. Cutaneous respiration, from the word itself it is skin, through the moist skin, typical example frog. Then buccopharyngeal respiration, that is the buccal cavity, through the buccal cavity the respiration can take place. That also in the frog we can see. The buccopharyngeal lining is very thin and it is highly vascular, through that the direct diffusion of gases can take place. Third one, it is branchial respiration. Branchial means gills. So mainly fishes, they are respiring through the gills. Then fourth one, it is pulmonary respiration. That is pulmonary means lungs. So pulmonary respiration, it is mainly the exchanges taking place through the lungs. The last one, it is tracheal respiration. Trachea, it is the main respiratory organ in insects. So through the trachea, the respiration can take place. So these are the main organs which are concerned. Then conditions required for respiration. So minimum requirements that should be satisfied if we are calling a particular organ as the respiratory organ. So here these are the 5 conditions, and it is very, very important. Membrane should be moist and thin. So we have discussed all these 5 organs, different types of organs. There everywhere we can see the membrane which is very thin, as well as they are very moist. Always mucus covering or water medium will be there. Through that only the respiratory exchange will take place. Second one, it should be highly vascularized. That means immediately overlapping there must be blood vessels. That means always the respiratory gas exchange is taking place from the atmospheric air into the to the medium mainly here blood only. So there should be continuous supply of blood, which will ensure that there is a diffusion of gases from atmosphere to the blood. Then third one, there should be extensive surface area. Surface area should be very wide, then through this the diffusion can be possible very easily. Then there must be an existence of pressure gradient or concentration gradient. So outside more amount of oxygen and inside less amount of oxygen. So from where there is more to less, so that pressure gradient should exist, then only the diffusion of gases will take place. The fifth point is solubility of gases. So the gas should be soluble in the body fluid, that means in the blood. So carbon dioxide also should be soluble, oxygen also must be soluble. So solubility is one of the important criteria for the respiratory exchange. That is why nitrogen is very less soluble compared with oxygen and carbon dioxide. That is why in our blood the solubility of nitrogen will not be dissolved. It will take more time. So we need not we don't have that much requirement of nitrogen. So mainly oxygen and carbon dioxide only will be diffusing gases that is present in our body, and we will not absorb that much of nitrogen from the atmosphere, even though atmosphere contain around the 70% of nitrogen. Now we'll move on to respiratory tract. So respiratory tract will start with a pair of opening. That opening is called as nostrils. It is guarded by minute hair and it is lined by a mucous membrane. So this hair will filter the air, and this mucous membrane also, it is highly vascular, and at the same time it is mucus coating will be there, so this will prevent, and the mucal discharge also will be there. That discharge will contain antibacterial enzyme that is called as lysozyme. So lysozyme can kill the pathogens or any microbes present in the that is entering through the air. Then the nasal chamber, it will lead into nasal chamber, then it can pass into the next region, nasopharynx. Nasopharynx is the first portion of the pharynx, and then it reaches into the glottis. Glottis means it is the opening of trachea. Opening of trachea, which can be covered by another cartilaginous flap that is called as epiglottis. The epiglottis, the function of epiglottis is to prevent unwanted entry of the food while swallowing the food into the trachea. So if the food is reaching into the trachea, it can block the alveolus. So to prevent that, there is a flap over the glottis. Glottis means the opening of trachea. So this epiglottis will cover the glottis. So automatically the food will be passed on from pharynx to the esophagus. Now the next passage is larynx. That is the beginning or the entrance itself. The pharynx itself is called as the larynx. Trachea is called as larynx, which is also called as the sound box. That is, it consists of vocal cords. When the air passing through the trachea, this vocal cords will vibrate, and that vibration only comes out in the form of sound. And in human male, when they enter into the puberty, there the larynx is covered by the bony case, and that cartilage will be slightly enlarged, and then we will call it as Adam's apple. So Adam's apple appearance or enlargement of Adam's apple at the time of pubertal period is an indication of entry of or the beginning of puberty. That means you are stepping into the adolescent period. Then we will move on to trachea. It is approximately 22 centimeters in length, and it is supported by cartilaginous rings to prevent the collapsing of the trachea. So it will ensure continuous passage of air to the air pipe. Then it is divided. It is when it reaches near the chest region, it will divide into two branches, and that branches is called as bronchus. Okay, plural is bronchi. Then again it enters into that each branch will enters into the lungs. The second and further divides into many branches. Approximately 23 times it is dividing again and again, and together we'll call it as secondary, tertiary, and go on, and finally minute branches, that is called as bronchioles. Then this bronchioles will terminate in a duct. That duct is called as alveolar duct. This alveolar duct ends in air sacs. That air sacs are called as alveolus. Alveoli is the plural. Each lung is again covered with double layered membrane known as pleura. Outer pleura and inner pleura. In between, the space is filled with pleural fluid. So this is an outline of respiratory tract. This is the flow chart form: nostril, nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveolar duct, alveolar sacs, ends in alveoli. So then this is the diagrammatic figure for 3-mark question and all. They can ask. So you have to start from epiglottis, larynx, trachea, and if possible you can fix the head portion also. You can start with nostril and the nasal cavity, then the pharynx, then larynx, etc. You can start, and this branches one side alone only you have to mark the internal structure. So here we can see the yellow colored region, that is the pleural membrane, outer pleural membrane and inner pleural membrane filled with cavity, that is called as pleural space filled with the fluid, pleural fluid, which will protect the lung as well as it will act as a shock absorber. Then again one more protective outer covering is there, that is the ribs. Ribs will protect the lungs from the mechanical injury. Not only the ribs, we will collectively will call it as rib cage, that is in the front region sternum, sides the ribs, and the back side it is vertebral column. So altogether it forms a covering rib cage. Then the bottom region, the whole thing, we'll call it as the thoracic cavity. It is enclosed in cavity in the body, that is called as thoracic cavity. It is bound by a muscular separation, muscular wall, that is called as diaphragm. So this is an outer, almost the collective figure of this respiratory system. Now I will move on to the respiratory tree or respiratory tract. So here I don't want to repeat it again. Nostril, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, the trachea and the alveolar sacs. The airways divide 23 times, that means trachea, then again primary trachea divides into bronchus, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and so on. And how many times? 23 times it is dividing. The first 16 generations of that divisions forms the conducting zone. That means there is no exchange of gases, only the transport of gases. That is why it is called as conducting zone. That is bronchi, bronchioles and terminal bronchioles included in this part. Then again the further 7 generation, that means after 16 branching, then 17th branch onwards, that is called as transitional as well as the respiratory zones. That means there little bit of exchange can take place, and respiratory zones means alveolar duct, alveolus, etc. There the diffusion is taking place. Then altogether the number of alveoli. Alveoli is the saccular structure, and there it is bound by very thin membrane and it is highly vascularized. There through that only the respiratory gas exchange from the lungs to the blood and from blood to the lungs also it can take place. So herely the number of alveoli in each lung, there can be 300 million alveoli can be present. And the total surface area when we are considering 180 meters square. So that means it is approximately a surface area of tennis court. Okay, that much of area will be covered because we need the conditions are thin membrane, then highly vascularized, then diffusion should take place, the pressure gradient or concentration gradient should be there, and surface area also must be high. So all these conditions are satisfying. Then permeability of the gases, that also satisfied, hence the lung is acting as the ideal respiratory surface. Now this is just a diagrammatic representation of the branching of the respiratory tree. That means the branching, highly branched. So we can say a tree within our body is called as respiratory tree. There is one more tree is there in the brain also. There is a tree that is called as arbor vitae. So two trees we can say. One is respiratory tree and other one there is the divisions or the entering of gray matter into the white matter of the brain, and that is arbor vitae. Arbor, the word meaning is brain, not a tree. The meaning is tree. So two trees in human beings. Now we'll move on to the air passages. That is trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, then terminal bronchioles. So by the time 16 times it will divide, and then 16 times means both the lungs when you are considering 32 times. So number of tubes in the branch here it is given. Then again once it reaches respiratory bronchioles, the conducting zone we said, that is here it is conducting zone, here it is transition zone or respiratory zone. There through that every now and then each membrane and their boundary the gas exchange can take place. So respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts ends in balloon-like structures. That balloon-like structures are called as alveolar sac or alveolus. Now this is the diagrammatic presentation of the alveolus, and here each and every, see, balloon-like structures, they are lined by squamous epithelium which is protective in function. Then the thickness of that alveolar membrane is 0.0001 millimeter, that means 1 mu m. Okay, micron, 1 micron, less than 1 micron, 0.5 to 1 micron is the thickness of the membrane. That means 1 millimeter is divided into 1000 times, and 1 by 1000th of that thickness only, this one, the membrane, the thickness. So very thin membrane. It is ends in balloon-like structures. So this balloon-like structures are called as alveoli. It is completely surrounded by a very good number of capillaries, and capillaries it starts with artery, then ends in veins. That is why here the mixture of blue and red. Red stands for artery and blue stands for vein. So intermediate network of blood vessels only we are calling it as capillaries. They are somewhat purple in color. So it is completely covered with blood vessels, and from the alveolus the gas is exchanged into the capillaries, and from there either it will join with the it will continue as the vein. Okay, vein. Now we'll move on to the next respiratory membrane. And because the alveolar membrane, there are three barriers which surrounds, and collectively together we will call it as respiratory membrane. So it will be, thickness can be, already I said, 0.5 to 0.1 micron. It consists of, what are the main barriers or the membranes which surrounds it is? It is an alveolar epithelium. We have said squamous epithelium. So each and every alveolus, you see, it is a sac-like structure and it is bound by green cells. Okay, so that green cells are green colored cells which is marked here as the epithelial squamous epithelium. Squamous means flat, rectangular in shape and flat, and it is covering, protective in function. So squamous epithelium, it is lined, and here the space, that is alveolar space, and it is lined by a single layered alveolar epithelium. Then it rests, always the epithelium rests on basement membrane, non-cementing substance. Basement membrane means it is non-cellular, resting on cementing substance for attachment. Then there will be a space, you can see yellow color space, that is called as interstitial space. The word meaning the space between the tissues. Here also one type of tissue, here also another type of tissue. So the space within the tissues are called as interstitial space. Then the capillary basement membrane. There will be basement membrane, or you can say the endothelial cells of capillary. That means endothelial cells of capillary means the capillary blood vessels wall. The membrane, it is made up of endothelium. Inside it is, hence the term endothelial membrane. So mainly alveolar squamous epithelial layer, interstitial basement membrane, then interstitial space, endothelium of capillaries. Collectively we will call it as the respiratory membrane. So through this membrane only the diffusion is taking place. Diffusion between which one? Diffusion between the space within the alveolus. Here the air will be accumulated, and through this membrane it will cross this membrane, and finally it will be deposited in the blood which is present within the capillary. So this one is acting as the thin membrane which enhance the diffusion of gases. So this is called as respiratory membrane or diffusing membrane. Then here these are the main methods by which the lung is protected. Rib cage, then in that rib cage itself, in the sidewise it is ribs, and the back it is vertebral column, front it is sternum, then bottom region the diaphragm and pleura. Pleura is the membrane, outer pleura and inner pleura filled with a space that consists of space which is filled with pleural fluid. So all these are the points. Now we'll move on to the steps. The steps in respiration, there is 5 steps. The first process is exchange of gases, breathing. Pulmonary ventilation we'll say, through which when a person is taking in air, the more the air which will be rushed into the alveolus, drawn in, and carbon dioxide rich alveolar air will be given out. So atmospheric air will contain more amount of oxygen that will be taken in. When the person is breathing out, the carbon dioxide rich air will be going out. So this is only a physical exchange. Then once it is filled, alveolus is filled with respiratory gases, the diffusion across the alveolar membrane, or you can say respiratory membrane, will take place. So diffusion of gases from the alveolus to the lungs, to the blood vessels or capillaries, and return from the capillaries to the lungs. There is a diffusion will take place. Then the third step, the capillaries, once the blood receives the respiratory gases, it will transport from lungs to the tissues, to different parts of the body. Then once it reaches the tissues, what will happen? The diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. That means oxygen from the blood will be given to the unloaded to the tissues, and in return from the tissues the carbon dioxide will be taken and will be given to the blood inside the capillaries. Then it will join out as the vein, and then vein will carry and again will hand over to the lungs. So that in that way the diffusion within the blood and the tissues. Here it is diffusion between the lungs or alveolus and the blood, means here it is blood and the tissues. Then the last point is utilization of oxygen by the tissues or the cells for catabolic reactions and resultant release of carbon dioxide. That means this oxygen which is received will be utilized for the breaking down of glucose and convert the glucose into carbon dioxide, water and energy. So these are the 5 steps. Now this is the mechanism of breathing. We have learned already. This is just a physical process, and here you can see the inspiration and expiration. So when the taking in of air is called as inspiration, and giving out of carbon dioxide rich air to the through the nostrils from the lungs, it is called as expiration. When inspiration is an active process because energy, contraction of muscles are taking place, so energy requirement is high, hence that process is called as active. Whereas the expiration, it is just relaxation of the muscles. There we do not need energy, hence it is called as passive. So this one is active process and this one is passive process. Mainly 3 types of muscles are taking part. That is, one is called as external intercostal muscles. What do you mean by external intercostal muscles? Because it is surrounded by ribs, and the ribs are supported by externally a set of muscles. And when they contract, so in the inspiration, external intercostal muscles will contract. Simultaneously, there is another group of muscles also that is called as oblique muscles. Oblique muscles and external intercostal muscles which supports the ribs, they will contract, and as a result what will happen? The rib cage will raise to the front. So rib cage as such, it will raise to the front. And along with that, there is diaphragm muscles. Another term of diaphragm muscle is phrenic, P-H-R-E-N-I-C. The diaphragm muscles also will contract. Diaphragm means it is a dome-shaped muscle. So when they are contracting, it will be pulled down, or we can say flattening of the diaphragm. Okay, it will flatten. So when it is flattening, what will happen? As well as the rib cage also will be raised to the front. The pulmonary volume, the space within the lungs will increase. When the space within the lungs is increasing, the volume is increasing, then pressure will decrease. When the pressure is decreasing, outside more pressure, that air will rush into the lungs. So this process altogether we'll call it as the inspiration. Just reversal of that one only, here the expiration it will take place. So here it is all, here it is contraction of external intercostal muscle, contraction of phrenic muscles, along with contraction of abdominal muscles. Abdomen also, the muscles also will contract. So all these contraction results in increase in pressure inside this, the lung capacity, and the diffusion of gases is taking place. Just opposite only, reverse process, that is relaxation of diaphragm muscles. So that will result in again regain of dome-shaped structure, then returning back by the contraction of external intercostal muscle, abdominal muscles as well as the phrenic muscle. They will bring back the ribs down to the normal. Then the pressure, chest volume will increase, pressure will increase. When the pressure is increasing, outside it is less. Where there is more pressure to less pressure, the diffusion of gases is taking place. So this is the mechanism behind the breathing process, inspiratory as well as expiratory. Inspiratory is active, expiration is passive. Now this is just a flowchart model. Just for your convenience, I have made the chart form. What I said, the same thing, only in points it is written. So you can refer this one. Now we will move on to the next important topic, that is pulmonary capacity. So whenever you are learning pulmonary capacity, instead of by hearting, understand the main points, then represent in this chart form, then automatically all the points will be reaching into your mind. You can recollect it very fast, and for one word questions, different combinations of this volume they will ask, so you won't make much mistake. So this pulmonary capacity graph is very, very important. So this whole area represents the space within the lung, you can say volume, and this is the duration, time, how much time each process is taking place. So this green line represents the volume of this variation in the volume when each process is carried out. So first we will study with tidal volume. So what do you mean by tidal volume? Collectively, the tidal volume means the amount of air that is taken in or given out during normal inspiration or normal expiration. So normal breathing, when you are taking in and giving out, that breathing, how much air is taken, that is called as tidal volume. So the value is 500. The second one, IRV, inspiratory reserve volume. Inspiratory reserve volume means it is the maximum additional amount, not maximum, additional amount of air that is taken in with the help of with the help of forceful inspiration. That means normally we are taking 500 ml. Apart from that, normal inspiration we are taking 500 ml. Apart from that, we can take or we can inhale few more additional amount of volume, and that when it is taking forceful inspiration. So additional amount of volume of air that can be taken into the lungs in forceful inspiration is called as inspiratory reserve volume, 2500. Just a contradictory term only, expiratory reserve volume. This is the maximum amount of, or additional, not maximum, additional amount of air that can be given out, by forceful expiration is called as additional amount of air. Apart from normal expiration, again we can, with force, we can release some amount of air. So that additional amount of air, with the help of forceful expiration, we have to exert some force and we can exhale some amount more. That amount is called as expiratory reserve volume, that is 1000 ml. All these amount is very, very important. Then the fourth one, it is residual volume. That means even after giving out in the forceful expiration also, even after forceful expiration also, certain amount of air is retained within the lung. That is to prevent the collapsing of the lungs. Otherwise, if the lung is vacuum, then the diffusion will be very difficult. So at any cost, the lung will not be in a vacuum state. Always certain amount of air will be retained. So that amount, the volume of air that is retained in the lung even after forceful expiration is called as residual volume, 1400. These values, if you are learning, then you need not worry about the other values. You can automatically calculate. Now we will move on to the IC. IC means inspiratory capacity. So this value, inspiratory capacity, means it is the amount of air that is present within the lungs, that is retained within the lungs by the end of forceful expiration. Okay, that is reserve volume. Inspiratory reserve capacity means it is the total volume of air that can be taken in by the forceful inspiration. Okay, total volume of air that can be taken in by the forceful inspiration is called as inspiratory capacity. Then the next one, it is expiratory capacity. What do you mean by expiratory capacity? Or another term also is there, inspiratory capacity. It is the total volume of air after normal expiration. Okay, after normal expiration. After expiration, when we are taking forcefully the amount of air, maximum amount of air, that can be called as inspiratory capacity. That means when we are breathing full into that, so it will consist of TV plus IRV. That means tidal volume also will be there. Along with that, IRV also is there. That means inspiratory reserve capacity. So this is altogether we can say when you are taking forcefully the air. Forceful inspiration when you are taking after the end of normal respiration, okay, or normal expiration. After the end of normal expiration, with much effort, how much amount you can take in by forceful inspiration, that is called as inspiratory capacity. The volume value is 500 plus IRV, we said, that is 2500. It can be even up to 3000 also. So it will vary approximately 3000 to 3500. Then the reverse only, this next one, that is expiratory reserve volume, expiratory capacity. Expiratory capacity means from this to this much. Expiratory capacity. Here it is not given. That is EC. So what do you mean by EC? EC is the total amount of air that is expelled out. The total amount of air that is from here to this one. Here to this one. Expelled by the forceful expiration is called as expiratory capacity. So that is the value equivalent is tidal volume plus ERV. Tidal volume is 500, ERV is 1000. So it will be coming around 1500. That is ERV. Then that is EC. Then next one, it is functional residual capacity. You see this one, functional residual capacity. That means the amount of air retained within the lung, the amount of air that is seen within the lung after normal expiration. So this is the normal expiration. So after normal expiration, how much of amount of air is retained in the lung, that is called as functional residual capacity. That will be equal to expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. So normal, when we are expiring, the certain amount 500 ml will be eliminated out. The remaining amount what is retained within the lung is called as functional residual capacity. Then we will go for vital capacity. Vital capacity means this whole range. So what does that mean? This is inspiration, forceful inspiration. This one is tidal volume. This one is forceful expiration. So how will you calculate all those things? Vital capacity means it is the maximum volume of air that can be breathed in after the end of normal expiration. So maximum volume of air that can be breathed in after the end of normal expiration. Normal expiration is this much only. So this much when we are giving out, again we can fill the lung with more amount of energy. That is called as vital capacity. Vital capacity is equal to tidal volume plus IRV plus ERV. Or else we can say IC plus EC. Okay, IC is up to this, then EC. So in different ways the same thing can be represented. Then we will move on to total lung capacity. So total lung capacity means it is the maximum amount of air that can be accommodated within the lungs is called as total lung capacity. So how much air can be present? So here it is the total value. In different ways the same equation can be given. It can be tidal volume plus, it can be ERV plus, it can be TV plus, ERV plus, then IRV plus RV. That is one equation, total lung capacity. Or else we can say the vital capacity plus RV is total lung capacity. Or else we can say IC plus EC plus RV. IC plus ERV plus RV. In that way, different form it can be asked. So this is all the explanations. That is, tidal volume means volume of air normally inspired or expired in one breath without any effort. That means normal inspiration or normal expiration amount. Then inspiratory reserve volume means it is the additional volume of air that is taken in by the forceful inspiration. Okay, forceful inspiration, inhaled forcefully after normal inspiration. Then expiratory reserve volume, that is the extra amount of air which can be exhaled forcefully out and after a normal expiration. Then residual volume means the amount of air retained in the lungs after the forceful expiration is called as residual volume. Then vital capacity means the total amount of air which can inhale with maximum effort and also exhale with maximum effort. That is called as vital capacity. Then inspiratory capacity, total volume of air which can be inhaled after a normal expiration. So forceful inspiration, when you are taking forcefully, when you are taking, how much air is entering into the lung, that is called as inspiratory capacity. The same way, after the end of normal respiration, how much more you can expire. So it is the total volume of air a person can expire after a normal inspiration is called as expiratory capacity. Then functional residual capacity, that means the normal ventilation, how much amount of air can go in and out, and that is called as functional residual capacity, volume of air that will remain in the lungs after normal expiration. Normal expiration, after that how much air can remain in the lung, that is called as functional residual capacity, that is residual volume plus ERV. Then total lung capacity, total volume of air that can be accommodated in the lung at the end of a forced inspiration. That means the sum total of oxygen or air which is present in the lung altogether. The value will be around 5,000 to 6,000. So with this we have come to the conclusion of first module. Okay, next module I will send it later. In that we will discuss with the transport of oxygen, carbon dioxide, etc. And third module will be the respiratory disorders and etc. So like that 3 module only I am planning to conduct the revision. Okay, thank you very much.